Today I'll be returning to my presentation of World Bible, edited by Robert O. Ballou, and my comments on these things. As one can see, 1944, yeah. There's a lot of sources that he compiled and edited down to this. Some of them almost as recent as this book. Some of them, quite a ways before, 1870, Buddha-Gosha's parables, the J.M. Broadwell Quran, 1867, anyways, so the true religion of the future will be the fulfillment of all the religions of the past. Well, that is why I'm on the path that I'm on now. The true religion of humanity, that which in the struggle of history remains as the indestructible portion of all the so-called false religions of mankind. There never was a false god, nor was there ever really a false religion, unless you call a child a false man. All religions, so far as I know them, had the same purpose. All were links in a chain, which connects heaven and earth, and which is held, and always was held, by one and the same hand. F. Max Mueller, in a letter to the Reverend M. K. Schermerhorn in 1883. The idea of God constitutes the general foundation of a people. Whatever is the form of a religion, the same is the form of a state, and its constitution. It springs from religion. George Wilhelm Hegel, Philosophy of History. And on to the formal general introduction. Man's basic problem is his need to find a way to live in constructive peace in the face of forces which tend to thrust him into destructive conflict. There is nothing new in this. Centuries ago, some of the wisest of men faced the problem and set forth a method for its solution, a way of life based upon social idealism, which must begin with the most intimate relations between individuals and extend to the most enlightened cooperation between nations, in order to make war, the fear of war, and the worst of man's miseries only bitter memories of the past. The kind of idealism required for this tremendous accomplishment, the idealism which so often colors statements made by religious theorists of the West, has often been called Christian. To be sure, it is yet that this is only a small part of the truth, for these ideals of world brotherhood and international human morality were uttered in many places long before the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. And, they like to call anything they like Christian, but things aren't necessarily of the influence of the Jesus worshippers. During the greatest of all religious eras, roughly from 800 to 500 BCE, India, China, Persia, and Israel were all injecting into human thought what was then a new force. Without question, this force has been one of the most powerful influences in human life, for persisting without material change to this day, it has determined every statement of idealistic social purpose to which we now pay homage. And the axial age didn't really bring as much new as people thought. It popularized ideas like reincarnation, but the core truths were certainly around. Religion, as we conceive the meaning of the term, today may be said to consist of three conceptions, and the actions which spring from them: man's conception of the source of his being, of his self, and of other human beings, and his own proper relation to them. In primitive, polytheistic religions, there was little, if any, connection between the first concept and the last two. Was there? Is that really the case? It doesn't really seem to have usually been the case when you look into even, the admittedly polytheistic cultures. Religion born of fear and questioning consisted chiefly in the propitiation of gods and spirits through sacrifices and ceremonies, performed in hope that supernatural protection and favor would be bestowed upon the worshipper. Gods were thought of as beings possessed of great, though limited might, who often exerted their power in malignant ways, unless properly wooed by offerings and circumvented by witchcraft. So jinn. Shayateen, not jinn. Their relationship to men was more like that of the autocratic rulers extracting tribute than that of loving heavenly fathers, whose concern was for the welfare of their earthly children. Remember what Freud said about people who label God in such ways. With the appearance in India of the Upanishads from 800 to 600 BCE, Gautama the Buddha, 560 to 480 BCE, and Mahavira, 599 to 527 BCE, of Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, and Lao Tse of 604 to 517, maybe, BCE. In China, Zarathustra, 660 to 583 BCE. In Persia, that date is actually one of the least likely. The 8,000 years ago, or that's actually not terribly likely, but in Persia, and the pre-exilic prophets of you know, 750 to 586 BCE in Israel. Sacrifices, ceremonies, propitiations ceased to be enough to make the religious life of man. Well, it never was. The whole God concept was changing. In Mahavira's Jainism, the existence of all gods was denied, and man's religious duty consisted entirely of thought and behavior, unconnected with any form of worship. Now, Islam in any age was thought of as sort of an atheism, because it was like, none of these things are gods. If the bridge builders came saying that, they would, like, and a lot of the words that we translate as gods don't really render into gods, although they can be treated as gods by the polytheist and monotheistic people who aren't really, I don't know why they call themselves monotheists. They just can't be honest about it. In the Hindu Upanishads and in Taoism, the ruling principle of the universe was conceived as a single, intangible, indestructible force. Brahma, Brahman, or Atman in the Upanishads, Tao in Taoism. In each case, it was a benevolent force working for the welfare of mankind. In the original Indian Buddhism, the gods were recognized, but as creatures who needed salvation as badly as did man himself, while by implication the Upanishadic conception of Brahman was denied. Here, as in Jainism, meditation and social behavior were substituted for worship. Questions about divinity and immortality were questions which tended not to edification. Confucius preferred not speaking about God, but spoke of the ordinances of heaven and human conduct instead, in Zoroastrianism and the Judaism of this period. God was worshipped as a single, personal, universal, benevolent force, a loving Father God, whose care was for the well-being of his children, the human race. And not all Jews used this term or this conception. They didn't really think of themselves as children of God, much less in the Christian sense. Accompanying these changed God concepts were changes in the religious rules which determined human conduct. In India, the highest desideratum of the religious was the cessation of rebirths. In Upanishadic Hinduism, this was achieved through a mystical union with Brahma. In Buddhism and Jainism, through the attainment of nirvana. In Confucianism, Taoism, and the Judaism of this period, well, after 540 BCE, you can say that a sort of Judaism had appeared, or was appearing. The reward sought was the good life on earth, distinguished by peace, prosperity, and happiness. In Zoroastrianism, the goal was paradise after death, but regardless of differences in the states sought as the result of the religious life, all agreed that they could be achieved only through individual purity of heart and mind, good work, and righteous loving kindness to one's fellow men in recognition of the essential unity of men, each with all others, and each and all with the divine principle. And remember, a higher status could be the detachment, devoid of any feeling or thought of love, one's according rights, one's doing the right thing. It was in these days, rather than in those which made Bethlehem of Judea famous, that the principle of peace on earth, goodwill to men, first began to sweep across the world like a cleansing wind. And, they found a few different Bethlehems, but Bethlehem is also sort of the name for Virgo, and so someone born in September at that time, now September is a Leo sign, in the age of Aquarius. Sweep across the world like a cleansing wind. Denied and flaunted. Century after century. By conquest, wars, racial and sectarian persecution, commercial greed, social and political ambition, and fanatical disagreements. This ideal yet remains the prayer of the truly devout and the hope of all the peoples of the world whose lives have been swayed by these religions and Christianity. It may be argued that Hinduism and Zoroastrianism do not belong in any category which groups the religions of goodwill. It is quite true that greater emphases were placed in the Upanishads upon philosophy, union with Brahma, and the ceremonial sacrifice than upon social ethics and the degrading caste system and the subordination of women was perpetuated by them, and quite strongly even in the New Testament. Yet there are many ethical and humanitarian principles of the highest order enunciated in the Upanishads and set forth by them for the first time in India as prerequisites to the religious life. The very concept of union with and through Brahma intimates the unity of the human race, and it is significant that the religious philosophy of Gautama, the Buddha, growing as it did directly out of the period of Upanishadic influence, included one of the highest codes of individual purity and social ethics which has ever been formulated. In Zoroastrianism, though ethical precepts are more difficult to find than in Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, and later Judaism, those which occur are of the highest order, and a whole philosophy of social behavior is innate in the Zoroastrian emphasis upon the righteousness of work. The similarity of the fundamental principles of all these creeds, which with Christianity one might well call the goodwill religions, for this phrase designates their greatest distinguishing quality, may be seen by examining a few statements from several of them. In the Upanishads we read, "As all spokes are contained in the axle and belly of a wheel, all beings are contained in the Atman, who knows that one whose dwelling is love. He indeed is a teacher. As he acts, so will he be. He becomes pure by good deeds, and bad by bad deeds. Whatever deed he does, that will he reap. Be subdued, give, be merciful, sacrifice, study, charity are the first branch of the law. The good is one thing, the pleasant another. It is well with him who clings to the good. He who chooses the pleasant misses his end. The Atman cannot be gained by the Veda, nor by much learning. He who has not first turned away from wickedness, or whose mind is not at rest, he can never obtain the Atman. From the Buddhist texts, hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love. This is an old rule. Do not kill or cause slaughter. One's own self conquered is better than all other people. Let a man overcome anger by love. Let him overcome evil by good. Let him overcome the greedy by liberality, the liar by truth. A man does not become a Brahmana by his plaited hair, by his family, or by birth. In whom there is truth and righteousness, he is blessed. He is a Brahmana. To one in whom love dwells, all in the world are brothers. From the Zoroastrian scriptures. Masa Yasnehe Zarathustra. They didn't call themselves Zoroastrians, because this is about giving praise and song to God, not the particular prophet. He who relieves the poor makes a Hura king. Whether one is lord of little or much, let him show love to the righteous. From Confucianist scriptures. What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. Return justice for injury, and kindness for kindness. The tendency of man's nature is good. Wisdom, benevolence, and fortitude, these are the universal virtues. To give oneself earnestly to the duties due to men may be called wisdom. The man of perfect virtue, wishing to be established himself, seeks also to establish others. Wishing to be enlarged himself, he seeks also to enlarge others. Wishing to be able to judge of others what is nigh in ourselves. This may be called the art of virtue. So judge not, lest ye be judged. Well, you're automatically going to be judged, so you have to judge in the way that you would like to be judged. And obviously the believer wants for himself the belief, the goodness that he wants for others. Love all men, know all men. From the scriptures of Taoism, keep on good terms with men. He who loves the world as he does his own body can be entrusted with the world. So far as arms are concerned, they are implements of ill omen. He who takes delight in the slaughter of men cannot have his will done in the world. The sage makes the self of the people his self. To the good I act with goodness, to the bad I also act with goodness. To the faithful I act with faith, to the faithless I also act with faith. I have 3 treasures. The first is called love. The second is called moderation. Third is called not venturing to go ahead of the world. And also, I may say, not speculating. Return love for great hatred, the virtuous resort to agreement. The universe and I came into being together, and I and everything therein are one. Everything has Tao within it, and continues to produce it without end. The endless love of the sage for his fellow man is based on the same principle. From the words of the pre-exilic Hebrew prophets, according to Jewish tradition, take away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not bear the melody of thy voice. But let justice roll down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Forasmuch as your treading is upon the poor, and ye take from him burdens of wheat, ye have built houses of hewn stone, but ye shall not dwell in them. Ye have planted vineyards, but ye shall not drink wine from them. I despise your feast days. Nowadays, Christianity has been replaced by festivities that aren't even in their own scriptures, much less ascribed by prophets. And Judaism has a lot of extras that they have obliged one type of Judaism or another. Let no man strive or reprove another. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. Keep mercy and judgment, and wait on thy God continually. Do justly, love kindness, and walk humbly with thy God. Behold, says Jehovah, I will make a new covenant. I will put my law in their inward parts, and in their heart will I write it. Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, because thou hast spoiled many nations. All the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwells therein. Oppress not the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and shed not innocent blood. Thus saith the Lord. Let not the wise man glory in wisdom, neither let the mighty glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches, but let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me. LVX, that sort of thing. That I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For it is in these things I delight. And, of course, the concept of love is actually stronger and clearer in Judaism than Christianity, even though Christianity copied the same basic book. But Christianity makes relatively little, it's not as clear of a concept, or it's not right in its concept. Anyways, Christianity, growing directly out of later Judaism, perhaps gave a greater emphasis to the basic concept of brotherly love, agape, as a motivating force in intercourse between all peoples. And I'm going to continue later in a few minutes.